Today, I want to talk about using Claude for non-coding work. This has been something which has been part of my workflow for quite a few months. I was making videos about Vibe admin with Cursor a few months ago. It's definitely become more of a popular thing. People are using Claude Code with Obsidian. They're using it to manage their journals. They're using things with MCP tools and making complex workflows. And now we've got Claude Cowork. So Claude Cowork looks like this. It looks like a chat. And it's very similar to the Claude chat interface, except it has access to your file system in the same way that Claude Code does. Some small differences between it and Claude Code, mainly I would say it's the interface. It doesn't have terminal access. Essentially, it is Claude running on your local file systems only on the files that you want it to have access to. This is from Claude's website. It analyzes your request and creates a plan. It usually asks you some questions. It will break the work into subtasks if it needs to. It will execute work in a virtual environment, so it's isolated. And it can coordinate multiple work streams in parallel, so sub-agents. And it will deliver the finished output in the file that you're working in. This is a tool which has sped up the way that I work. For example, this week, I had to do some research to look if so they're called learning management software, the type of software that you would build a course on. Someone wanted me to find a platform that met quite a lot of different requirements. And my initial response was like, I can research this for you. They paid £500 for me to research it and find a viable platform for what they wanted to do. So that meant that it had to meet all of their requirements. It meant that I had to get them to specify their requirements to see what aligned and what didn't. I had to understand the cost of the software so that I could assess whether it was even profitable for them to use that piece of software. And so initially that conversation started in normal Claude. This is what I'm trying to do. Can you suggest some platforms so I can check them out a bit further? Had a look at a few, started to narrow it down to one or two that I thought looked like they would do the job. Then I asked Claude, can you give me a list of questions, like yes, no questions, which we can send to the client to just narrow down features they would definitely need. Things which are nice to have, but not critical. Client sent that back. Then it narrowed it down to one platform that I thought seemed like it would be the best one for us to use. So then I put a summary of that chat into a new Claude Cowork chat that this time now linked to a folder so that I could get it to actually write this report and give me a file. I was asking it to verify against actual docs from this software if each of these features existed and explain how to test some of these things. This particular software wasn't the one that was showing up top. It wasn't really that easy to find, but it just fit exactly for what I was looking for. So Claude suggested a pretty good software for that. It found all the docs. It linked all the features that the client would have needed for their setup to actual docs from that software and then linked them in a report. I sent this to the guy. He was really happy with it. He said, this looks good, but can you send me a summary of this? Something a bit less technical. Fine. Got it. So this is where then the guy said, can we go ahead with you setting this up for us? Sent him a proposal. Got Claude Cowork to write that proposal. Tweaked it a little bit for some of the specific details. They wanted to have a demo ready for the 16th of March. Today's the 3rd of March. So there would only be so much that we could do in the phase 1 of setting this up before it was rolled out to their users. I split it into phase 1 and 2, what tasks are included in each phase, and then from the initial research, based on all of the things that they would need so that it met their requirements, I already outlined how long each of those things should take to set up. Because Claude Cowork had all of this context, it could write the proposal really well. And then I said, am I making any rookie mistakes with this setup? Because this was a fairly big project, this phase 1 and 2 part of actually setting up this platform. Am I shooting myself in the foot with this proposal? I didn't want to get excited about it being a big project and be too hasty with what I'm offering. Is what I'm offering good? How much is this really worth to me? How much time is this actually going to take me? So that I can then produce documents which are client facing, but then I can have the context from them to have the real chat in the background with Claude about, is this good? Should I change this? Is this price too low? Do you think this is expensive? How does this compare? And then it gave me a really good understanding of the level of value which I was delivering by setting this up for them, and how much they didn't really have to think about because it had all been kind of sorted in this research phase. And then you can use the context from that conversation to update the proposal. Sent this guy the proposal, and he said, are you able to send me a summary of it? Again, right? Fine. Claude, give me a summary of the proposal so that it just outlines some of the key information. This guy is not very technical. Just give me the meat of this. Cool. 2 paragraphs, sent it to the guy. Happy days. Today, sent the invoice for phase 1 and it's paid. So this is work which is getting paid for. This is actual work where Claude Cowork is partnered with me, and the only thing that it's not doing is talking to the client. I'm the go-between and the orchestrator to make sure that what it's saying makes sense. And then obviously I need to actually carry out the task for the work. You know, I had to test the platform that it suggested during the research. I'm going to have to physically do the tasks that is outlined for me for the setup of this platform. But now I can say, this guy wants to go ahead with it. Can you send me up a list of tasks that are going to actually be the step-by-step to deliver this phase 1? I haven't got this working with Claude Cowork, but it's something I use with Claude Code. And I have the MCP for Todoist, and it will add a task with subtasks and everything like that. So I think it's possible with Claude Cowork, though I haven't tried it yet. And so I found that I was remembering a lot of details here. I wasn't using Claude.md for this client documentation directory. I was kind of remembering what we'd spoken about. But actually, if you structure it in a way like this, you know, what you're trying to achieve, what you've spoken about, any work in progress that it goes here, the deliverables, the things that you're actually going to send to the client. I don't know how well this correspondence thing would work. It is one way you could possibly do it. But I think if you can integrate it with an MCP, or you can give it context of your conversations in perhaps a more automated way, that would be good. But a lot of times I feel like this could just be something that you dictate to Claude, get it to summarize, make it the Claude.md so that it outlines who is the client, what is it they want, how do they prefer to be spoken to, what's the most important files here, what are the deadlines, and then that is context in all of its work. And this is where Claude becomes a co-worker that knows the project, knows the context, can go off and do research, it can create documents, it can reference other documents, and it just makes this process of going backwards and forwards with someone the main thing that you are managing. You're just making sure that everything's aligned, and Claude is actually going and doing these manual tasks, writing a document, researching something, getting the links for documentation and associating it with certain features. All things which are very time consuming. Would have probably taken 2 to 3 times longer, at least, without using Claude. I set this up just as a test. I asked Claude Cowork, I gave it a screenshot and said, can you just set something up so that it follows this structure? And I'm just going to see what this looks like. So I said, I'm working on a health insurance company's website. And this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about for the structure of this. So this would be the brief, outlines the goals, the overview of who the client is. The Claude.md says what this project is. Always read the brief.md first. So you're telling it what folders are important or what files are important. But always check this before starting any task. Save rough work into the notes. Use descriptive file names. Any work in progress goes into the drafts. Final deliverables go into that folder. This is the kind of way that I see this happening now. So you can set up the exact workflow you want this to follow, what you want it to do in terms of naming conventions, tone and style, for the client-facing deliverables, what tone you want those documents to be written in. And this is where you would put notes, for example. And this acts kind of like a CRM. Now, I haven't got this down to a perfect science in terms of how do you keep your pipeline and your client information all together like an actual CRM and still get the benefit of Claude. I'm not 100% sure yet, though one of the ways I've been doing it is just having like a mono repo per client and then having, for example, their website and their documentation. The docs is essentially what this folder would be. You could call it docs or client notes. And then in that case, say that it was this client and then this was client notes and then everything was in that. Then you could have client website as a separate one. And then it would have context of all of it. And then this folder, if you were doing Claude co-work and you wanted it to have context of everything, you could open this root client folder and you could say, I want to send the client some information about all of the pages on their website and a quick report about how good their SEO. I'm still kind of working on this because I do think that the context should come out of your head and into these Claude MD files. So when you launch Claude Code, it walks up the directory tree from your current working directory, loading every Claude.md it finds. Files in the subdirectories below your working directory are loaded lazily, only when Claude reads files in that subdirectory. So for your client folder with a nested Next.js site, the structure would look something like this. All discovered Claude MD files get merged into context, but more specific, the ones closer to the files being worked on take precedence. So if you're working inside website, both files are loaded, but Claude MD in the website folder wins on any conflicting guidance. So this is where you would have a Claude MD in the root for the broad client level stuff, and then project specific architecture or commands in the website. Instead of one giant Claude MD, you can split instructions into modular files under Claude rules. These are discovered recursively, and you can path scope them with front matter. So that rule only loads when Claude is reading files matching that pattern. So it doesn't waste context. Keep each Claude.md file under 200 lines. Longer files eat context and Claude may not adhere to all of it. So this is good. That's kind of what I thought. I think this is a good way to structure it. So in short, use a Claude MD at each level and Claude Code, and I think Claude Co-work essentially work in the same way, will handle the hierarchy automatically. Root instructions apply broadly, and the subdirectory instructions are a layer on top with higher priority when you're actually working on those files. So this, it's intuitive again. It just feels like that's the way it would work. And I think it's important to get some of this out of your head and into the Claude MD or rules, because you're already trying to remember a lot, or what stage you're at, or things like this, where you can just have Claude know all of it and update that Claude MD as you make progress or things change. I hope that this is useful. I've been using this for so many different things. This doesn't even touch on how I'm using Claude Code for website work. Doesn't even touch any of that. This is purely the admin side of what I've been doing. Proposals, research reports, web research, extracting tasks. At first, I was a bit unsure about this co-work interface, but it is actually really good. And I think a lot of it comes down to how we structure the files. Something like this is definitely a good start. So give this a go. Let me know if you find this useful.